pornography is a serious issue.
It consumed my life. So it started taking up more and more time, more and more energy, and then me pushing the boundaries.
It's all pleasure with no responsibility. That's deadening.
If your brain learns to be aroused by watching other people have sex, it is not necessarily going to carry over to the ability to get aroused when you're one-on-one with somebody else, right? Especially young kids who are consuming a lot of pornography, the brain is learning sexual arousal to other people having sex.
So you're going to program yourself into being a voyeur?
Or just create challenges in sexual interactions with a real partner. A neuroscientist, not a psychologist, but what we know for sure is that if an individual repeatedly engages in this circuitry, let's say masturbation and pornography, with increasingly potent forms of stimulation that are on a screen, a couple of things happen. First of all, what's being reinforced? What's being reinforced is a high dopaminergic response to watching other people engage in sexual behavior, which is very different than being in a first-person sexual experience. Okay, so right there, you know that what's being reinforced is not actually any kind of improvement in communication skills.
Voyeurism.
It's voyeurism, fear of or experience with sexual dysfunction that clearly pornography can lead to. And here I'm specifically talking about males. I actually don't know the literature on females. You know, I'm not saying pornography as a stimulus is bad or good. What I'm saying is it, in its availability and its extreme forms, it's a very potent stimulus. And very potent stimuli of any kind, extremely palatable food, extreme pornography, extreme experiences like bungee cord jumping, those set a threshold for dopamine release. The higher the dopamine peak, the bigger the drop afterwards. And it's not that you drop to baseline, you drop below baseline. So again, it's not, these things aren't good or bad, they just have to be controlled in a way, because when people are pursuing dopamine peaks over and over and over, and they aren't getting them, typically it's because they've been pursuing that activity far too often.
Who spend too much time watching pornography, they have trouble performing with regular sex. And the reason is that just like with alcohol, you might start out with some beer, maybe some wine, you progress to hard liquor, mixed drinks, and finally you're just drinking the vodka right out of the bottle. Same with pornography. You start out with tame stuff, and little by little, you go up to more and more extreme acts. When you're with a real human being, it just doesn't do it anymore. And so a lot of people have erectile dysfunction. They don't even want to have sex with real people.
It's all pleasure with no responsibility. That's deadening. It's parasitical in a sense. And I don't mean that, I'm not making a value judgment. I mean, it's no wonder the young guys are caught up in this, because it's an unbelievably powerful technology. It drove the development of the internet, let's not forget, right? So it taps into one viciously primordial motivation. And so these guys are being blasted by what biologists call superstimuli all the time. So imagine that there's a biological stimulus that has an effect on you, and then you can magnify it. Provocative physical elements exaggerated. And so men are very visual in terms of their sexual processing. The guys are pulled into it, and they're pulled into it also by curiosity, but I think that ethically it's not good. It's not good. It's an easy out. That's the other thing, is what better indication are you going to get than that no one wants to be intimate with you? It's the ultimate rejection, and that's partly why men are terrified of it, and I understand that.
Masturbation and pornography are potently tapping into the dopamine system and can undermine the very processes of what I consider healthy processes of finding a mate, dating, communication, eventually, if it's appropriate, sexual interaction,
etc.
etc.
It's undermining pair bonding.
But the actual orgasm response and ejaculation is strongly associated with the so-called sympathetic nervous system, which has nothing to do with sympathy. It has everything to do with, it's a kind of a stress response. And then it reverses to a parasympathetic response. And a hormone called prolactin increases dramatically after ejaculation in males. What does that do? That blunts dopamine release and testosterone for a very long period of time, which makes sense if pair bonding and sort of, in our species anywhere, there's this idea that then other molecules would be exchanged with partners, pair bonding, potential for raising mates, etc.
I try to stay off of pornography, man. That's one of my biggest arch nemesis is pornography.
Why?
Because it just weakens me. Yeah.
How so?
I put all my sexual, my fantasies and stuff, they're not mine anymore. They live somebody created them better than my imagination can. And so they live in these, on the internet in these boxes. And it's like, and if it's not mine, I think, then I don't value it as much or something. And so I think it like weakens my ability to like be able to have sex and like be comfortable in that sort of world. And
Really?
Oh yeah.
Weakens your ability to be comfortable. Like, how so?
The human brain is a combination of two things. One is volition. That's the choices that we make. Mm-hmm. The other is the biological substrate. That's the material we've got to work with. And I think that second part we neglect. It's easy to say, well, I can't control my body, especially as you get older, Patrick. But we think about our mind, the thing between our ears, is we got total control over it. I want to think about a giraffe. I want to think about a cup of coffee. I can think about anything I want. And that's absolutely not true. The biological substrate of our brain, including the neurotransmitters like dopamine in our brain, they determine so much of our experience, and a lot of people don't realize just how much that is.
You ever notice that when you get on a phone and you're scrolling Instagram, it's like a lot of fun, like this stuff is cool, you're seeing people, and then sometimes you're on there and like, this doesn't feel good, but I'm doing it anyway.
Yeah.
I'm just doing it. That's exactly how people talk about their drug use. That's exactly how people talk about alcohol use. That's exactly how people talk about gambling. You imagine this high, but the high doesn't show up, and that's, you're dopamine depleted.
Porn isn't the issue. The issue is that you're not living your life the way you want to. And so you need a vision of life that's more compelling than the porn. And you need a counter vision too that frightens you, because otherwise porn is obviously extraordinarily gratifying in the short term, but you seem to be suffering from the medium to long-term consequences of its use. And so you need a story that you can tell yourself that's really deeply thought through about why this is not appropriate for you, how it's hurting you, and how it's minimizing you, and perhaps making you embarrassed and ashamed and more socially isolated, and all of that.
And what you're doing, it's like your pre-workout. 1 scoop the first time, you feel like you can jump over a building. 2 scoops the next time, Pretty soon you're taking 4 scoops of that, 4 espressos, and you're kind of sitting in the parking lot texting on your phone. Well, what's going on? Well, you're dopamine depleted. So don't dopamine deplete, and then you won't deplete your ability to go increase testosterone.
These porn channels are going to learn what kind of women you like, what you like the women to do, and it's going to know you so well that no flesh and blood human being is going to be able to compete with the pixels. And we're going to be less and less interested in human beings and more interested in pixels. Hopefully, things will get bad enough that we begin to realize, hey, this is a dangerous thing. We've got to start looking at this the way we look at alcohol and cocaine, and realize that this taps into our brain in such a powerful, primitive way that it's going to destroy our life.
Relationships are healthy. Friendships are healthy. Romantic relationships are healthy. And anything that inhibits the pursuit and functioning of healthy relationships is where you have to start saying, wait a second, is this behavior getting in the way?